Hello and welcome to the Japan Politics Podcast. Right, so we're currently in the middle of the leadership election for the LDP to determine the next leader and essentially the next Prime Minister of Japan, as it's almost certain that whoever wins this leadership election by default as the LDP, the largest party, will become the next PM and leader of Japan in general. So I think first I want to have a quick look at those who looked like they might be running to be the leader of Japan but opted not to. The first is Katsunobu Kato, who's the Minister of Finance. He's in the end opted not to run. Either he didn't fancy it this time or is determined he doesn't have the support to make a serious run and has opted instead to endorse Koizumi. And that's a bit of a running theme you might see, because also Taro Kono, who's the ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was also touted as a possible candidate who might run this time, has also endorsed Koizumi. And perhaps not that surprising, Koizumi is a major candidate, a serious contender who's likely going to go into the final two and has looked like he will be for a while. And he's sort of a younger, sort of a centrist unifier candidate as well. So it's you'd see why a lot of candidates, given that the Abe faction that Sanae Takaichi belongs to has been a little bit weakened through the loss of members in the Diet and just generally being a bit tainted by scandal, why you think that they might opt to endorse someone like Koizumi, who's not associated with that faction, as it is more of a unifier candidate who's going to try and bring all the factions of the LDP together more. So they've opted that he's the better choice. And that brings me to the two frontrunners, because it seems like for a long time that Koizumi, like I say, the younger sort of centrist unifier candidate, and Takaichi, sort of more of the right-wing Abe faction or associated with the Abe faction, for a long time it looked like those two were both going to run in the next election whenever Ishiba went, and in fact they have both run. And it was speculated for a long time that they would be the two frontrunners, that one of them would be the next Prime Minister, and again it looks like they're very likely the two frontrunners and will end up in the final two. They haven't necessarily made that easy for themselves, though, because they've both been involved in a bit of a scandal recently as well. For Takaichi, I think the scandal she's had is a bit less damaging. Now, she was giving a speech, and she was talking about Nara Park, a park where there's lots of deer. It's like sort of a natural park in Japan. And she's made a speech where she said that foreign tourists have been attacking the deer and injuring them. Now, this has opened her up to a bit of criticism for being perceived as attacking, tourists, and also because I believe someone affiliated with the park, I think either a member of staff may have, or something like that, has come out and refuted those claims and said that they've no knowledge of something like this happening. Nonetheless, Takaichi has defended herself and said that she's looked into it independently and verified that information herself. So whether that emerges to be true in the long run, who knows? But that's what she claims. But she's put herself in this position of being attacked as potentially it being false, whatever the truth is. Whereas you'd think that if she wanted to make this sort of point, that sort of a general anti-tourist behaving badly point, there's a lot to work with, because although most tourists, when they go to Japan, do behave, there's so many that there is like a minority that have done things she could point to. Off the top of my head, there was that instance where a drunk tourist got into a temple and damaged it, and he admitted it and went back in and confessed, so there'd be nothing to attack her with there, because he admitted that what he'd done. And also generally a lot of streamers have sort of done things that are perceived as being disrespectful in Japan as well, so there's been quite a few instances of that, and often they've literally recorded what they've done themselves, so she wouldn't be open to attack if she just picked one of these few examples of tourists behaving badly that are sort of beyond refute. But from what I can see, this hasn't really damaged her brand or changed anyone's opinion that much for what they thought before she said this. It's interesting, though, because it sort of continues a trend I've seen where, obviously, last year, famously, Trump in a debate claimed that immigrants in Springfield, Ohio were eating dogs and cats, and he got a lot of attention and was had a lot of people refuting that, and that got a lot of media attention when Trump said that. Also, recently, Nigel Farage has been in a bit of controversy for claims I believe he's meant to have made about foreigners eating swans in Britain's parks. And he's had a lot of controversy for that as well. So it's sort of a continuing trend of sort of right-wing populists making these sort of claims about animals being attacked. So it's interesting that that's what she chose to say. Now, Koizumi's scandal seems to have a little bit more of an effect than that. Now, his scandal was that someone within his campaign staff is accused of allegedly sending out emails to sort of supporters or people who are likely to favour Koizumi with a series of slogans and like catchphrases to say about Koizumi in support of him. And I think the idea of this was that they would comment it in his favour, possibly on a live stream, I think. But the idea, I think I'm paraphrasing here, but there were statements like roughly along the lines of, and not an exact quote, you know, it has to be Koizumi. Koizumi's a true conservative. Koizumi is what the LDP needs. You know, things like that, very sort of pro statements. But the fact that they were sending out emails and sort of effectively feeding lines makes it seem very fake and manufactured. And he's caught a bit of heat from that. And I believe a senior member of his campaign has had to resign off the back of that as well. And there's been an apology for that as well. I don't believe that Koizumi is alleged, and it's certainly not been proven, I think, that at this point that he knew about that. That's not, I believe, on the table. But it really does open Koizumi up, particularly given his age, the fact that he's quite media friendly, and you know, he's quite youthful. That it opens up all sorts of accusations from people like Takaichi, if they wanted to make them, or other people running against him, to say, oh, you know, he's inexperienced, he hasn't got a proper grasp on his campaign, he doesn't know what his staff are doing, and, you know, that they could even call him, you know, vain, image obsessed, you know, and just accuse him of being not a serious person, effectively, based on this behaviour. Nonetheless, this doesn't seem to have seriously altered, from what I've seen, the amount of support behind Koizumi. It looks like he's still going to go into the final two with Takaichi, and so despite these scandals, it's still going to be Takaichi versus Koizumi in the final two, from what I can tell. You know, despite all this time, all this speculation, that those two would be running and likely would be the favourites. In the end, it looks like it's going to be those two in the final. Now, to look at the recent polls, and this is coming from polling of support rather than what Diet members are going to vote for, because the support will be split between LDP members and members of the Diet politicians themselves. The opinion polls broadly show Sanae Takaichi in the lead, with Koizumi in second. So Sanae Takaichi looks like she will have a lead from actual voting members. A couple of recent polls I want to pick out. One from Nippon Television had Sanae Takaichi on 35 and Koizumi second on 28. And very interestingly, Hayashi is in third with 23, which is a very solid score. And it looks like he's had a bit of momentum recently, where he's sort of surged in the polls a bit from being a bit of an outsider. And he looks to be a sort of a strong third there. And I wonder if he's maybe picked up a bit of steam from this Koizumi scandal. Also, he seems to have done quite well in recent debates. And, you know, he's a sort of a person who's been around, had a lot of top jobs, so he's a serious candidate. And he's spoken quite well in debates and interviews, from what I can see. And also, he's generally got a reputation for sort of getting along well with people. And I think he's opted not to criticise the people he's running against in this campaign, and has kept things fairly clean, which would explain why maybe Diet members quite like him. But that seems to be feeding through to the membership as well. Or perhaps it's just he's done well recently, and that's why people are supporting him as a possible alternative to Koizumi or Takaichi. But despite that, based on the polls I've seen, he's got a little bit of a hill to climb still, if he's going to try and make it into the final two and actually be on the final ballot. It could be that he picks up momentum, he does something in the final days and could overtake one of those two, but I still think it's maybe unlikely unless he does something substantial, because it's just such a gap, and it seems like for a long time those two have been the favourites to make it into the final two. He would really have to pull something out, despite this recent surge and bit of momentum he's got, to sort of make it into the final two and actually get on the ballot. Another alternate poll sort of shows the same thing. Kyodo News, a recent poll, had Sanae similarly ahead on 34.4, Koizumi on 29.3, and again Hayashi in a strong third, this time on 19.5 according to that poll. So that gives the picture that Sanae is ahead with the actual potentially voting membership based on those polls. But it looks like, from what I've seen generally, and I don't have hard numbers on this, but just the impression I've picked up is that Koizumi is doing better with actual endorsements and sort of support from Diet members, who are going to be crucial in who they vote for. So it looks like Koizumi will lead as a sort of, as you'd expect, maybe a sort of a more of a unifying figure who's trying to represent and get support from all the factions, or maybe get more support from actual Diet members versus more of the sort of further right wing Takaichi, despite her having more support from the Abe membership. So I guess the question is, if it's for those two on the final ballot, can Koizumi actually be stopped? Can Sanae Takaichi do anything to stop him? Although I think she does have more support from the membership at the moment based on the polling, my personal opinion, and I could be wrong about this, and it will be very interesting to see what the final vote is on the October the 4th, is that she will struggle to make that up with a membership, just because he seems Koizumi to have such good support from Diet members compared to her. And it seems like whoever drops out, people like Hayashi or other candidates, and people who are maybe more continuity Ishiba or sort of generally sort of not as much from the right wing of the LDP, you'd think Diet members are more likely to go in behind Koizumi, particularly if he's seen as the front runner and likely to win in the end. They'll want to get in there and sort of gain his approval and potentially line up jobs and avoid alienating him if he's going to be the next leader of the LDP and Prime Minister. So perhaps he's more likely to pick up whoever drops out in terms of support from Diet members and endorsements from other candidates who are running against him at the moment. But I could well be wrong, and like I say, it's all a bit up in the air and based on speculation at the moment, and certainly there have been upsets in politics before, and it will be very interesting to see if there's any more controversies or things to upset the race in the next few days, or surprise endorsements, or if the actual votes are different to this polling. But I would suggest that maybe Koizumi is a little bit of a favourite in terms of who you'd expect to be potentially winning the final two, and it looks like it will be Koizumi and Takaichi in the final two. So it just remains to be seen, can anything turn up to upset the apple cart and potentially stop Koizumi at the moment. That remains to be seen, but it's very interesting, I think, and I look forward to early October 4th seeing those results and finding out who will win the runoff as well. But yeah, that really is that quick run-up of what's going on in the LDP leadership race. But thank you so much for listening, everyone. This has been the Japan Politics Podcast. Sayonara, goodbye.